So that's a little bit about the JTA. And I always liked that video, and believe it or not, that video is actually dated. It's actually exactly a year old. And I do that on purpose to kind of just walk you through, within the past year, even with COVID, the JTA has completed the JRTC, the Jacksonville Regional Transportation Center, that is now open. It is now our new hub in La Villa, right across from the intercity bus terminal. On the other side, you have the Prime Osborne, and within that building, our Skyway APM automated people mover system is anchored there. And so a lot of progress has been made, and we continue to do a variety of things. One of the things that I wanted you to get out of the video is how unique the JTA is. Everybody knows that Jacksonville is the largest landmass city in the United States. And if my boss had his way, he would probably rename the JTA the Jacksonville Regional Transportation Authority. Because we don't just operate in Duval County and in Jacksonville proper, right? We operate across the other counties, Clay, Nassau, St. John's. And so we are really a regional provider of transportation services. We operate beachside buggies at the beaches. We now have Go Tuckin downtown. You're talking about an authority that operates a ferry, train, and even paratransit services. So we play in all fields. And then add on to that, the JTA is a very unique authority. You should understand this, because we're one of only five or six in the United States that also build roads and bridges. The majority of the structures that you see here throughout Jacksonville were built by the JTA. So as you saw in the video, the Dames Point Bridge and some of these other structures were built by the JTA. That gives us a very unique profile and pedigree in terms of the things that we're able to do. So when we talk about, transit-oriented development, when we talk about urbanization, we now are just not looking about, where do we put the right transit, the new lines or the new routes. We're also going in there, we're building the new roads, we're building wider streets, we're building sidewalks. We are also in the business of literally, putting in the infrastructure. And so that's a very unique position to be in. So that's a point that needs to be emphasized. And so the premier project that was talked about, of course, was the U2C project. And as we talked about automation and innovation, I bring this up because it's also unique for a public transit agency to really make this kind of pivot. Of course, under the leadership of Mr. Nat Ford, several years ago, they started looking at what we needed to do with the automated people mover. Out of that came a Skyway modernization program, and then as that kind of matured, we got into all kinds of spaces, and then the need came up to really kind of build out this automation and innovation division. And so I won't spend much time giving you a little bit of my bio, but my prior life to the JTA, I was the general manager at Amazon that brought Amazon to Jacksonville. So the large fulfillment center up by the airport, I ran that facility from pretty much brick and mortar to operations to over 3,000 employees. And so, when the JTA won the Bill grant, and there was an opportunity to come do the sexy project and literally build the first autonomous vehicle public transit system in the country, I jumped on that. And so that's important, because for our board and our CEO to invest in that, to bring the kind of talent that we brought into the JTA, that is not a very common thing. Not many transit agencies or transportation authorities you're going to go to, you're going to see, these type of folks. And I've been able to kind of, hire my team. Some of the folks that you're going to meet outside showing you this are folks that I brought over from Amazon, Silicon Valley, electric vehicle experts, automation engineers. It's been a significant pivot for us. And so that really empowers us in terms of some of the things that I'm going to talk to you about. In terms of the automation and innovation division, it's really anchored in kind of these two buckets. You have the U2C program, which you see here in the blue boxes. And then you have kind of just automation and innovation projects. Within the blue boxes, and the U2C stands for Ultimate Urban Circulator, the strategy has broken that up into 4 distinct buckets, projects or phases. And so the first one here is the Bay Street Innovation Corridor. What I want you to remember is the Bay Street Innovation Corridor as the at-grade, street-level first phase of this autonomous vehicle system and network. The second one is Autonomous Avenue, which represents the first phase of the Skyway conversion. You then have the remaining Skyway conversion, and then you have the neighborhood extensions, okay, which will extend out to the various neighborhoods. We're going to talk a little bit about these things called agile plans and then special projects. And then that will kind of give you a flavor for all the other things that we're playing in. As it relates to the Ultimate Urban Circulator, that is JTA's vision. Like I mentioned to you before, it really started out and was birthed from the dilemma of what to do with the Skyway. If you're looking at this map, the Skyway is a 2.5 mile, 8-station system that does connect the north and south bank of Jacksonville. But it was never completed to fruition. As you can see, it does not connect east and west and go through the entire corridor of downtown. And so it was never really matured the way it was anticipated. And so the Skyway itself is over 30 years old. It's in various states of repair. So part of that initiative was to look at what do we do with the Skyway. A bunch of stakeholders got together and it was decided not only we're going to keep the Skyway, we're going to modernize it. And we were given the directive to go do that with emerging technologies. And so that's where, you know, the concept of leveraging artificial intelligence, autonomous vehicles, and all that came into play. And so the concept is relatively simple in terms of what's going to occur. I won't speak too much about this project in detail. Certainly we can take questions and, you know, I'll be sensitive to the things that I can answer because we are in an active 2-step procurement right now. So this RFP is out on the street. This first project is a $44 million project. The totality of the entire 10-mile system is probably to the tune of about $500 million. And so this first phase, you know, brings the route in blue, which actually, like I said, is going to connect the east and west anchors of downtown. On the right-hand side, you see that the route actually takes you right directly front door to the NFL stadium, to the Jaguar Stadium. And so I know there's some emotion around that with the ongoings of what's happening, but you can really tell with what's to come here. If you're looking at the waterfront side of the shipyards, you know, Jacksonville is kind of one of the few underdeveloped waterfront cities. And so the fact that we're going through this charge and this economic boom is really inspiring. And you know, the JTA is really getting geared up for that with bringing on the U2C program. The strategy has been very simple. We built a strategy around these kind of core buckets here, these 6 buckets. I won't dive into it. These are things that I'm sure you might have questions and answers about. This is just simply to illustrate that the first 2 projects, the Bay Street Innovation Corridor and Autonomous Avenue, are built under the same strategy. For us, our vision is that you will be able to get on a U2C vehicle, an autonomous vehicle, and ride that at elevation, transition to at grade, all the way to the NFL stadium. You'd be able to be fully interconnected, you know, take the bus or take, you know, in the future, who knows, commuter rail, right? Come in, get into the JITC, board a U2C vehicle, get to the Jaguars game and be able to ride that back and take transportation home as well. So fully interconnected that. And so the only difference between the 2 projects is the fact that the infrastructure and the funding strategy is a little different. But in terms of all the vehicle requirements, in terms of policy regulations, IT cybersecurity, you know, our mandate is that, you know, it applies across, you know, all 4 of those buckets that you saw. The concept is really simple. In terms of the elevated structure, our vision is that we will recreate that roadway at elevation. The Skyway system in Jacksonville is also unique. It was one of 3 pilot programs between Jacksonville, Miami, and Detroit. It was originally built to be an elevated roadway to be used with a rubber tire vehicle. Throughout the years, it was retrofitted with a guide beam and essentially made it to a monorail system. But in essence, I say this to say that doing this project is returning the Skyway back to its fit, form, and function, okay? And so people always ask, how do you see yourself really interconnecting here? The vision, or one of the concepts, is a series of ramps. So part of why we won the build grant was our ability to convince the US DOT that this was about leveraging existing infrastructure. And so keeping the existing Skyway infrastructure and then adding on to it to expand the transit network. And so through a series of ramps, potentially, and we're not locked into this, it could be a series of spirals, elevators, or transition points, you will interconnect and be able to get on your autonomous vehicle and ride both at grade and at elevation. Of course, the first phase that I mentioned to you that's right now being procured is just the at grade piece, and then the subsequent phases will then start the conversion and then do the connectivity between elevation and at grade. And so what you have here is basically the entire vision, right? You start out with what's in orange here, which is the actual existing Skyway system. You build these neighborhood extensions, and what you actually get is you start to interconnect through the downtown core these various neighborhoods: San Marcos, Springfield, La Villa, the emerging medical complex, right? You start to really see what downtown really can become, anchored at one end by the JRTC, where you can basically, go take your inner city. You have your connection service, you have your regional services, you have everywhere that you can get, and then you can basically come into that facility, get on the U2C system, and then make your way all the way to the youth sports and entertainment complex at the other end. All right, you have questions?
Sorry, I just see a new crossing in the river there. Is that like a ferry? What is that?
So part of what's envisioned is the potential of how we're going to have different transition points, potentially when we do the neighborhood extensions, and that is just right now conceptual. And as you know, I think there's also, I might miss the location here, but there's also kind of like an East City development, happening on the other side of the river there. So all of that is part of what's being envisioned of how we have these different transition points as well. So I'm gonna pivot a little bit just to move us along to talk to you a little bit about some of the agile plans, right? We're gonna walk through some of those buckets that I showed you earlier. And the reason the agile plans is important is because once we developed what we wanted to do in terms of the ultimate urban circulator, we got an enormous amount of interest in terms of where these vehicles, where this technology can be leveraged in other places and other locations throughout Jacksonville. And so the JTA looked at a variety of different opportunities. Like it says here, we looked at 22 different opportunities where this technology could be used. Out of that, we really matured and fully vetted out about four or five of them. And some of them you might have heard of. So, for example, one of the agile plans that's been developed has been right here for FSCJ on their South Campus. We've analyzed the ability of leveraging autonomous vehicles in terms of providing services for their students, particular special events, and so that involves a variety of different things in terms of plotting out the routes, looking where you would have stations, looking at what the ridership would be, and where this technology really is beneficial. There's a lot that we can have discussions about in terms of why autonomous vehicles. There's of course publicly it's been talked about the safety piece of it, but when you start to look at what this technology can do in terms of allowing folks to make a pivot in terms of their infrastructure, almost all of us drive to and from work, and if you look out the window, these vehicles just take up space and they sit there the majority of the day doing nothing. And so that is valuable space that universities, businesses, when folks are looking at how to expand and leverage their assets, that's not the best use of assets. So one of the other benefits, of course, is the ability to reduce that congestion, the ability to reduce use of parking lots, and allowing folks to kind of leverage the land and the assets that they have. So this is just one example of what we developed for FSCJ. We've also done that for Jacksonville University. And then, of course, we've also developed it for other private entities such as Mayo Clinic. In fact, our work at Mayo Clinic and looking at setting up a route for them, we had actually mapped out and did a lot of work on two different routes, one for their employees and one for their patients. And you'll be surprised now, a lot of the discussions that I get involved in, even when you talk about developers, builders, and we talk transit-oriented development, and a slew of other things. There are folks who have an enormous interest about, what these vehicles can do. So, for example, one of the questions I've been asked is, can these vehicles drive right into my building and drop off passengers in the lobby? So imagine, for example, a Mayo Clinic that is very focused in terms of their customer service, wanting their ability to have their patients, really dropped off door to door is no longer at the door. Brought right into the lobby. When you look at it, these vehicles that you're about to experience outside, no emissions, battery operated, fully electric. Their ability to drive in a building, in a lobby is all good. And so there's even a lot of concepts about how people are starting to look at how they design their entrances in buildings and engage in what that potentially could look like in the future. This work at Mayo Clinic, though, led to a phenomenal project that happened this year when COVID hit. Based on the work that we were doing, COVID basically took over. And then the JTA was called and we were asked, hey, what are the possibilities of these vehicles being deployed and helping transport COVID-19? And so the JTA was the first in the country, we believe the first in the world, to leverage those particular shuttles and full level 4 autonomy. What do I mean by level 4 autonomy? I won't bore you with the details, but there are 5, 6 levels of automation. When you start to get to level 4 or 5, that is a fully autonomous vehicle that removes the driver or the safety driver off of the vehicle. Okay, we did maintain control through a remote command and control, meaning we have eyes and ears, we had a remote kill switch, but most of the autonomous shuttles or deployments that you will see or hear about in the news are all demonstrations throughout the United States. And we can talk, there's some nuances here with automotive in terms of the work that Tesla, Waymo, Ford, and others are doing. They're doing stuff for commercial vehicles. And right now, if you have a Tesla and you run the Tesla autopilot, is essentially adaptive cruise control at high speed. That's a very different dynamic in terms of getting a vehicle to operate in a very urban environment, right? Interpreting pedestrians, bicycles, pets, and being able to have that interaction. And so that's a little bit of the nuance there. Today, most of these vehicles are operating, even in their current deployments, it is mandated that they operate with a safety attendant on board. Okay, which kind of, some people have asked, it kind of defeats the purpose of automation, and then you gotta take a smaller vehicle and then you gotta put a person on board. Certainly, of course, you gotta walk before you run. And so that's part of the process of getting everybody comfortable with it. It's part of the process of the safety profile right now with NHTSA. But the work that we did at Mayo Clinic really led to our ability to deploy these vehicles. And so while this video just plays, I'll talk to it. We spent 4 months at Mayo Clinic. We were able to leverage 4 shuttles. We deployed them across 2 routes. And these vehicles, like I said, were fully deployed in level 4 automation. This allowed the Mayo team to, again, reuse their resources elsewhere. As you can imagine, during COVID, it was all hands on deck. It also, allowed for totally, no interaction with humans, putting a cooler of COVID-19 on board and allowing the vehicles to transport that from one side of the campus to the other. We did that pretty much Monday through Friday, full service for 4 months straight. 4 months straight, from pretty much the beginning of COVID, and terminated our services right around the end of July, first week of August. And so this got the JTA national, if not international recognition, because this is the first time this was ever done. So through our partners, Beep and Navia, a lot of effort and a lot of work was done to accomplish this. So just kind of to show you a little bit of the power of automation, the power of these vehicles and what the possibilities are. It also opened our eyes at the JTA to the fact that we're not all the time in the business of just moving people, right? There's other benefits to transportation and what these vehicles can do. And so, throughout that time, we moved over 30,000 samples, and did that with 0 safety incidents. And so we're very, very proud of what we're able to accomplish there, and almost 200 miles in level 4 autonomy. Some of the other innovations that the JT has worked on is, some very simple things. You start to look at, what the pandemic, forced us to start to think about. We even, built this contraption. We're very proud of this because this was built by our technicians over at the Skyway. Just concept, back of a napkin here of, build us a sprayer tunnel, a sanitization tunnel, where we can basically automate that. It had a sensor. You had some sanitizing product that could be aerosolized, and basically, folks could walk through that tunnel and basically fully have their clothing sanitized. No different than you doing that with your hands, but it fully did that for your whole body going through that. Just another example of that. This slide is a little bit convoluted, but it's just to show you again, when we talk about this technology, the possibilities and where it can take us. And so the Automation and Innovation Division for the past year almost has worked on developing an artificial intelligence module. We actually call it a customer service module in terms of where it was really focused. What this AI module did is we were able to leverage machine learning, plug it into one of our existing buses. Most of our buses have camera and audio feeds, and we are now able to basically, through that module, the machine learning can actually run and alert the control center of when the driver is having certain interactions with customers. It actually picks up on when certain words are being said, and so you start to kind of draw on that. It can also track the vehicle performance. It also can get to the granularity of is your vehicle on track or not? Is it late? Is it going to be on time to its next stop? And actually alert the control center of when the vehicle deviates from its route. So you start to basically leverage some of this. And there's a lot of other applications on here, even on the maintenance side. When you start to talk about predictive maintenance and predictive analytics, this is what it's all about. Your ability to put that saves an enormous amount of money in terms of, traditionally maintenance is done, just by time, right? You usually have that little sticker on your windshield that says you hit 15,000 miles, you come in for this oil change. You hit 30,000 miles. Well, now, with these modules, you allow the way the vehicle is being driven to dictate when it's ready for a particular level of service. And so, the module itself can alert you and say, well, we know you haven't hit this mileage yet, but the vehicle is ready for a brake change. The vehicle needs oil or whatever the case may be. Or it can actually predict some of that stuff, so that way it feeds your maintenance schedule, and you have better understanding of how to order your supplies, better understanding of how you're going to manage your business. And so this is just another example of how some of this technology is being deployed or used. My clicker's been taken off again, guys. All right. Couple other things here, and then we'll take questions at the end. I see some hands going up. We recently, at the end of 2020, deployed the Amazon lockers, as you can imagine, with myself, Michael Feldman, having ties to Amazon. One of the things that we were able quickly to leverage on our relationship was bringing Amazon to the table to start to deploy lockers throughout our transit hubs. And so at all of our major transit hubs now, you'll have access to Amazon lockers. Now, you might think that this is just about packages. Yes, for Amazon it is. You can get your packages on your way to work, on your way going home. But we are also looking at the impact that this has on our ridership. We're looking at, even now, how do we leverage this? Some of our minds are thinking about how do we leverage this during the time of COVID in terms of distributing masks and making sure people have access to certain things. So these are all the ways now, by putting some of this stuff in place, and all the information that comes from that is all really good data. That is the new oil in terms of what products are being ordered on what routes, who's flowing through where. All that allows us to have really good data that helps us predict a variety of different things. The last piece that I want to talk to you about is a little bit about our test and learn program. And the reason I spend a little bit of that time is because you are, after this, going to go outside and experience some of these autonomous vehicles. And so part of what's very unique with the JTA also is, in addition to the U2C, in addition to some of these other areas that we play in, we basically launched this test and learn program. In the past, the approach was, we rent or we lease an autonomous vehicle, and we're basically trying to, test it. We're also doing community advocacy, getting people to interact with it. And part of the pivot that we've made is taking these vehicles and realizing that they were not maturing fast enough. And so the JTA did make a significant pivot here and decided to really kind of expand its test and learn program. And so we've leveraged the past data that we had. We also built relationships with all the major manufacturers, both international and national. So we know them all and they know us. And what we boldly said to them is, we want to be a part. We are in the transit business. We understand what it takes to move people. And so we are going to boldly tell you what your vehicle needs for public transport. A lot of these startups and a lot of these companies were manufacturing these vehicles and had really no concept of what ADA is, had really no concept of what these vehicles need to have. It's from the JTA standard of things for public consumption, right? And so we play in a little bit different world now when we bring these vehicles in. We're the only public transit agency that has developed a full test protocol for autonomous vehicles. And so we have our own test track, and I'll speak to you a little bit about this. And we test these vehicles to make sure that they fit form and function. We also have a lot of interaction with NHTSA. As you can imagine, this is a whole new world, even for the federal government. And so we are playing in the space of, spending a lot of time, particularly my boss with APTA, with the FTA, and in Washington, on starting to develop what policies and regulations look like for these vehicles. Of course, we have set up a variety of different councils. We have the Basic Innovation Council, we have the First Responder Council, but we have a lot of interactions with a variety of different companies. We also have an ongoing project and relationship with insurance companies, Munich RE, Liberty Mutual, where we're basically trying to help the insurance folks understand what it means to underwrite these vehicles. What I can share with you is what the insurance companies typically see as risk and on these policies is not necessarily where I see risk. And where they don't put risk is where I know that there's an enormous amount of risk. It takes actually quite a few number of years from what they shared with me for underwriters to really understand and underwrite a particular vehicle or particular operation. And so, of course, we play in the world of IT cybersecurity, risk mitigation, and all that. And so that program has really mushroomed. We took the leadership role in even putting out what we call the Golden 20. The Golden 20 was issued now almost 2 years ago, and it's our 20 critical requirements and guidance to the industry of what an autonomous vehicle absolutely needs to have for public consumption. And then from there, I talked to you a little bit about our developing of test protocols. You see examples here of a variety of different test procedures. What I will admit to you is our test protocol is very much focused on our needs in Jacksonville. So for example, you will not see in our test protocol, for example, a test for performance with snow, right? Because we don't see snow here. What you will see is a particular test procedure for heavy rain, right? And the team has built a rainmaker. We bring these vehicles into a tunnel and we simulate downpours of rain so that we understand how these vehicles perform. The team will walk you through what these vehicles are comprised of, but they have a lot of sensing technology, primarily using something called LiDAR, which uses lasers. It's very, very accurate, very, very good, but it has some of its downfalls, which is it refracts. It refracts off water, it refracts, in different environments. And so we want to basically understand that to be able to give that feedback to the manufacturers on what they need to do. Again, we've expanded. I'll talk a little about our expansion and our work with FSCJ in a little bit, but the JTA is probably the only transit authority in the country also. We are now on our 7th vehicle. We operate currently 3 vehicles on 3 different platforms. This is our 7th total vehicle in the program. We just took hold of our 7th vehicle across 4 platforms, and you're going to experience 3 of them today outside. And the last platform is the EV Star, which is the first retrofit FMVSS compliant autonomous vehicle. And so you'll get a chance to experience that as well. That EV Star originally was not built as an autonomous shuttle. It was an all-electric paratransit van, which we basically enhanced its ADA compliance. So we moved the ADA door from the back to the side, and then we retrofitted it with an autonomous kit from Rover Robotics. The JTA wholly owns this vehicle and will operate it. Right now, it only belongs to the automation division, and we'll go through the entire test protocol before it's leveraged for anything else. But this gives you an understanding. Why this is super, super critical is because our strategy is we will put autonomous vehicles and deploy that here in Jacksonville through the downtown core in the next 2 or 3 years. Bottom line. So this is, again, pushing the envelope, putting the dilemma at the front door of the US DOT and NHTSA, but also working with them on it, because right now, what prohibits the current shuttles, the boxy, smaller vehicles you see, is the FMVSS, the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety standards that exist. One of them says, for example, a vehicle that is allowed on a public road must have a steering wheel, must have rear view mirrors. As you know, these shuttles don't have a steering wheel. They don't have rear view mirrors. Hence, they're not FMVSS qualified, and they're not technically allowed on a public road. Okay, what we've done here is taken, and NHTSA has told us, right? We said, if I take a street legal van, I put an autonomous kit on it, I can run it fully autonomous. They said there's nothing legally today stopping you from doing that. Now, there's some nuances to that. I can speak to a lot of the safety precautions, safety protocols, and things that we're going to put in place. So we are doing it the right way. But keep in mind, it's parallel strategies here. Where you look at leveraging and the FMVSS compliance. It's the same thing why you see Tesla and some of these other folks can actually launch their autopilot technology because it has a steering wheel, it has a rearview mirror. They're not allowed to take that off right now. So this is a little bit about our new facility, our test track. We leverage an existing park and ride facility up at Armsdale. The Armsdale facility happens to be the facility that actually supports or provides transportation to Amazon as well by the airport. So somehow I seem to always be gravitating with a connection back there. But you can look at our other facilities and see, our other park and rides have, even from the aerial view, they give you this feel of, kind of a track, right? And so it offers us a unique opportunity to start to do testing and deployment of where you're going to get connectivity, meaning be able to take one of our BRT routes, get off, and then get on a U2C vehicle to basically get, what we call this first and last mile, right? Your last mile of transit will be your door-to-door service, possibly on a shuttle. You ride the bus to a hub, and you get on these vehicles, and you get closer to your destination. And our Armsdale facility, like I said, we're bringing on board a slew of different technologies and vehicles. We've taken the opportunity to also start to test the V2X technology. So we procured our own, what we call RSUs, roadside units, pedestrian sensors, flood sensors, and all that work is being done, right? In advance of the U2C deployment on Bay Street. we are looking at how all of these technologies interact with the vehicles. The other thing that we're playing in, and this is a diagram of our track. I'm showing this to show that the work that we do is not just about running these sexy vehicles. We are also piloting, 3D holographic technology in terms of even how we plan on launching our crosswalks. So if you look at this pedestrian crossing, this is a 3D printed pedestrian crossing. Why are we looking at that? Well, it turns out that Jacksonville is one of the top cities for pedestrian fatalities in the country. So when we look at, building roads, when we look at deploying a new route, when we look at bringing on autonomous vehicles, scooters, micro-mobility, all of that, it also matters to look at how do we do that and leverage all of our resources to make it safe and to make it a good experience for our customers. And so what you have here is the further you are away as you're driving, to your eye, the actual crosswalk looks like a 3D, like a boulders in front of you. Your natural reaction as a driver is to actually slow down. So as you get to an intersection, if you're traveling at high speed, you naturally will slow down because they look like bollards, okay? And so we're looking at this in terms of bike lanes, other opportunities in terms of how we design roads and paint some of our crossings. I won't bore you with this. This is a little bit about how we developed some of our test protocols and the things that we look at. This actually walks you through an example of how we do it in terms of picking a test category and use case. So for example, we start with the manufacturer. We look at the test categories, vehicle performance. We're going to basically test vehicle stopping capability and the critical elements. We run tests across concrete wet, flat, downgrade, upgrade. We run the test against asphalt and dry conditions as well. So again, an enormous amount of work and data and technical work that's going on at the JTA that's really leading the way. This is a good example of when we talk, the 5 levels of automation. You start to talk about, how we can force the issue of obstacle maneuvering. There's a video here, I'll skip it in the interest of time, but this is just to show you Bill Frazier, who's outside Google Meet, who's our director of quality, was testing the first overtake maneuver with the shuttle fully in autonomous mode. And so he sacrificed himself by just standing in front of it, and you can see the vehicle do an overtake maneuver. So simulate, for example, if you had like a UPS truck making a delivery on the road and was in its path, the vehicle has the ability to kind of sense all around it and make a determination that it's safe for it to make an overtake maneuver. I can show you that later. Last couple of slides, again, our expansion has even taken us with a partnership with FSCJ. Why do we do that? Again, for us, we're even looking at strategically, well, how do we start to train the workforce of the future in preparation for what is to come? Honestly, we share this pretty publicly, with our customers, but internally with our operators as well. So part of the concept is you might come to the JTA as a bus operator, but chances are you might have to wrap your head around being a remote command and control operator, right? The future of how you might operate some of these things might be no different than how, the military or the Air Force operates these drones, right? You could be sitting in a facility with cameras and a joystick and be able to take remote command and control of the vehicle and do certain maneuvers, but not necessarily be physically on the vehicle. And so we decided to expand our partnerships. Our partnership is threefold, and it looks at pretty much establishing a curriculum here. So we partnered, and I saw Paul Soar and Dean Brower had just walked in and walked out. But we have a partnership with them to look at helping them develop a curriculum here to start to establish what the training and the curriculum is going to look like for training the future technicians and folks that are going to work in this industry. And through that partnership, FSCJ has basically really leaned in. In fact, they have procured their own autonomous vehicle and will receive it tomorrow. And so we are partnered with them on that. We are pretty much an extension of them, and we'll serve to help them here because we have the expertise on this. We have also leveraged their Cecil Field CDL track as an expanded test track to what we do. We typically go to the CDL track to do high-speed testing in terms of looking at high rate of speed. We simulate railroad crossings. A variety of different work happens there. So there's an educational portion to it. There's a portion where we leverage and we have exclusive rights to the Cecil Field test track in terms of testing autonomous vehicles. And then the last piece, the education portion, we have that. Oh, and the last piece, of course, I showed you at the beginning, which is the Agile plan, is we have an ongoing on how we're actually going to launch a circulator on one of their campuses based on their needs. So we're very, very proud of this partnership and Dr. Avendano and Mr. Ford. And then the last thing is to just show you that it just doesn't stop there, right? I could talk all day about this, but in terms of our other projects, you know, you already know what we're doing on autonomous vehicles and retrofitting vehicles. Also tomorrow, or maybe today, the JTA will receive the first 2 all-electric Gillig buses, 40-foot buses. We received that here in Jacksonville. They will take about a month and a half to go through commissioning, and they'll be fully deployed on their next route, okay? There are other transit authorities that have electric buses from Gillig, which is primarily our manufacturer. We are the first to receive their first buses. So we're very proud of that. My team has really worked with transit operations in terms of the electrification, the infrastructure, and what is the maintenance and all that going to look like. You know, we play in the world. I talked to you a little about artificial intelligence. We're looking at other things that involve, you know, apps and integration for our customers. I also have an ongoing contract and project to actually retrofit a 40-foot bus and make that autonomous. Why? Well, at the beginning, I talked to you about how the JTA and the world that we play in is really a regional approach. So that's more a, you know, strategic outlook. All of our different platforms have a fit, form, and function in a place. So that the shuttle has its place. It's very nimble, where it's going to be able to go in terms of smaller streets, how it's going to be able to go into neighborhoods, how it's going to basically do that first and last mile drop off, suits the shuttle. You have the paratransit van that's going to have its particular operational domain. But we really are preparing for the future, particularly being in the state of Florida, which is, you know, with our state leaders and legislators, we have a very favorable outlook in terms of this technology. They're looking at how they can bring it to highways. The DOT is very engaged on how we can leverage this. And what I can tell you is you can conceptually see in the future that you would, for your regional services or your BRT routes, get on an automated bus that's going to take you from here to the beaches, from here to Clay County, or whatever the case may be. And so we are also looking at that. The last bit here is, believe it or not, is the JTA is even engaged in conversations of bringing the first eVTOL to Jacksonville, the first electric vertical takeoff and landing air taxi. It is not an autonomous vehicle. It is piloted, but this is actually here. It's actually going through its second round of FAA and EASA certification. The company is a company by the name of Lilium. They have recently announced that they are going to build their headquarters right here in Florida, outside of Orlando, and are going to basically build out their network here. And so the vehicle itself has a range of 185 miles. It seats 4 passengers. They're looking right now at an ADA version of it that's going to allow that. What should be interesting to all of you is their price point is to offer the service for the same price that you would get a black car service. So that the cost of this shuttle is not going to be passed on. It's not going to be a $500 ride, but you will be able to get on an air taxi and make it from here to Orlando. go from here to Atlanta or Savannah, Georgia, and have that connectivity. Their main ask, of course, is to use infrastructure. They have the same profile as a helicopter, so one of the things that's very interesting to them is the upper level of most parking garages, and how they can leverage that with the right electric infrastructure to basically land and provide, drop off and pick up points within their network, right? They always want to be placed at an airport first. So some of that is going to do that. So you can imagine the amount of interest that we have as it relates to some of our premier medical facilities in the area. Jacksonville is a big medical tourism city, if you didn't know. And so there's some of that interest in terms of how we're going to do that. In fact, some of those organizations are in discussions with us about how they build their helipad, how they build their buildings to prepare for this, because they're very interested in bringing eVTOL technology. So I'll stop there. That is to give you a little bit of a flavor for all the things that the JTA plays in as it relates to automation and innovation. We're going to take some questions in the room because we went a little bit past our time with some of the technical stuff. But I see a lot of hands going up, and then Matt, I don't know if we can manage, if there are folks online, if they can raise their hand or type a question in the chat, then I'll try to answer any questions they might have. We'll start on this side of the room first, yes.
Really quick, with COVID, are there any plans or maybe it's already been done as far as upgrading the air filtration system in the vehicles?
Yes. So several of the manufacturers, and not just for the autonomous vehicles, but bus companies, all that, have already released and provided opportunities in terms of UV lighting. There's a new electrostatic filtration system. Recently met with an organization that talked about even in your current filter systems, you put something that's the size of an iPhone, and it really draws the particles in. There's a lot of technology that's available. I think where there's a little bit of difficulty is it's all about the circulation within the vehicle, right? They made modifications where the filters themselves and some of the technology can actually, grab some of the particulates, but you basically got to get enough flow through a small vehicle or a 40-foot bus to basically guarantee that you're capturing all of that. Right there.
Quick question, with the autonomous vehicle and a monorail itself, do you see it expanding to the airport, St. Johns County, the beaches in the west side to pick up people coming out to work, sporting event, or even traveling at home?
I missed the beginning part of that question, I apologize.
With the monorail and autonomous vehicles, do you see it expanding to the four parts of the city?
Correct.
Airport, St. Johns County,
yeah,
to the beaches, all the way to the west side, pick up people coming for entertainment, work, going to the airport.
Got it. So let me ask the question. The question, because people online, so he's telling me you can't hear. He was asking, with the autonomous vehicles, it was mentioned that we'll be able to kind of interconnect people all the way from the beaches in other counties. How is that going to work? I might have misspoken there. The autonomous system was just the branch that you just saw, which is a 10-mile system just in downtown. What I was alluding to is the fact that being that it's anchored at the JRTC, you can then take your regional services. Right now, we operate a Clay shuttle. We operate a Nassau shuttle. So it's essentially our goal at the JTA is to provide connectivity. So really, if you live in St. John's, if you live in Clay, if you live in Nassau, you can get on one of our regional transportation shuttles, right? And any of you have ridden them, they're probably the premier service. You're talking all leather seats, tables, Wi-Fi, the works. They're some of the premier stuff that's out there. You can ride that right into the JRTC, and at the JRTC, from there, have a transfer point to get to your other locations. I'll elaborate a little bit more. in the future, could the autonomous transit system expand beyond what I showed you through downtown? Yes. Is that right now currently in the plans or in the works? No. Right now, really, we see where we want to be right now is to provide this innovation corridor through downtown. As you know, it's part of how we bring in. And by the way, the U2C program and what we're doing is also part of what you might have heard of the Bay Jacks initiative. And so we work very much in coordination with the TPO, with the city and other folks. The TPO is really responsible for bringing a larger vision to Jacksonville of a smart city vision. They have a smart cities plan. And it's not just Jacksonville. Somebody was just talking to me about, St. Augustine. There's other municipalities that are looking at their smart cities approach. The U2C just happens to be a part of that smart cities approach. Our funding and what we're doing is very much focused on transportation. But rest assured, there is a vision that's going to bring, for example, smart sidewalks, smart lighting, smart garbage cans. Now, we integrate with that. My funding and what I'm doing can only go to, procuring vehicles and the transit system to provide the transit network. But our vehicles are right now, based on how we've written our requirements, we'll be able to interact and connect with the smart garbage can or the smart lighting. Why? Because what you don't know right now is, for example, in downtown, the city of Jacksonville, the way they collect trash is, the trash collector just keeps driving around and just picks up, right? Doesn't necessarily know location X is full, location Y is having an event. It just picks up. So, and if he picked it up this morning and it's full by midday, he's not coming back for that other pickup till the next morning. So the advantage of having, for example, smart garbage cans is it actually feeds directly to that operator. Please go pick up this location. Smart lighting, same thing. It starts to do it. And there's a slew of things that I did talk about. For us, our vision on even how we leverage our autonomous vehicles goes beyond the transportation. The fact that the vehicles are retrofitted with 7, 8, some of them 10 LiDARs. LiDAR is also what's primarily used in doing road surveys. So believe it or not, every time my vehicle drives down a road, it is a road survey. That scan of the road can detect potholes, the condition of the road, and feeds directly to the city network and say, this is where you need to go do a repair, right? So there's a lot of ways that this technology starts to integrate and make things better connected. Okay? Yes, next question.
Yes, sir. I have a couple of questions, but I always try to go to the last point that you brought up, air flight, but I would say probably, if you think about emergency air flight, then you're talking about not just a shuttle for you to run, but an ambulance, you instead of going through the road, it can just basically land.
Yep. The question is about the air taxi and air flight. Is it being thought about in terms of emergency flights, probably for medical purposes and all that? The JTA is not necessarily thinking about that, but yes, that is being thought about. I will share with you, I go to these meetup meetings where I get to meet a lot of entrepreneurs and startup companies, even in Jacksonville. One of the things that's really taken off has been drones and medical deliveries or providing medical supplies via drones. That's probably in terms of, and by the way, I'm a recreational drone pilot, so I'm totally geeked out on that stuff. I fly my drone around my house, do that all the time. And so these guys have really done that. And so, in terms of providing, for example, organs, blood, being able to kind of provide that flight very quickly, meaning you don't got to put it, try to book a helicopter flight or book an ambulance, because basically it's open travel up there. There's a lot of cases that have already been shown that works really, really well. You had another question?
Yes, this is my.
Please go ahead. I mean, Terry's next, and then I don't see other hands, so continue.
You train models, artificial intelligence.
Correct.
If you come with new idea, the vehicle face the new obstacle.
Yes.
On the street.
Yes.
So do you train the we send signal to the controller.
Yeah.
We have a problem.
Yeah.
Where do you train the model? From the manufacturer or from the software?
Great question. All right, I can tell when I got my geeks in the room. So what you're talking about is what they call OTA, over the air updates. The vision of how artificial intelligence software and how this works is it's going to be just like how you guys get updates on your iPhone, right? You basically get the alert that says your new iPhone, so they let you kind of carry that for like a month, and then your phone gets to the point where it says you're gonna have to do the install tonight, or it's not working, right? And then they push you the install, and you get the new apps, you get the new software, blah 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 blah. The vision of this is that you'd be able to do over-the-air updates. By the way, that is exactly how Tesla does it right now. If you own a Tesla, they're able to remote into your vehicle and tell you diagnostic exactly what's going on. They know where you've been, they know what you've done, they know what you said in the car, all that. If you have Alexa, everything you said around Alexa is somewhere. I can guarantee you that. So all that stuff is being put into the machine learning piece and the artificial intelligence modules and kits, and yes, the over-the-air updates is absolutely can be done that way. Do we have anybody online with a question?
Yes.
Yes, let's take one online.
So first one is an easy.
Yes.
The JRTC open.
The JRTC did open.
Yes, and they wanted to know, is it open? What's the location? That type of
Okay, if you're in Jacksonville, it's across from the Prime Osborne. The address is actually 100 La Villa Center Drive. It should be on Google Maps, but you should know that when we build the building, we created that address. So the best way for you to find it is, if you know where the Prime Osborne is, it's right in between the Prime Osborne and the Inner City Bus Terminal.
Okay. Next question is, how does JTA intend to include local, minority, and small businesses utilizing SaaS software as a service, enterprise technology?
Great question. So hopefully folks online, you asked this question about how we're going to leverage minority businesses. And so this has been huge. The JTA has been a leader in this in terms of putting a very high percentage in demand on all of our vendors and bidders in terms of showing us this equity piece and leveraging local businesses, leveraging minority-owned businesses, and providing us the contracts and the work that we contract to do. That being said, within this space, this is why I personally am very engaged in the educational piece of it, because there is probably not as many opportunities, or I shall say, there are very few minority businesses playing in the artificial intelligence space today. In terms of vehicle manufacturers, in terms of software developers, there's not necessarily right now. You might have a minority software developing company, but in terms of the folks that are actually playing in the space, manufacturing these vehicles, there's not right now any minority-owned autonomous vehicle companies out there. That being said, we are very forward-thinking. We put the pressure on our vendors, and even in this ongoing procurement, won't talk too much about it, but this part is public. We've put a very high goal in terms of what we expect them to see on their subs. Being that we're also FDA funded, it is also a mandate that transit vehicles be able to show that they have a DVE portion of their supply chain. So at some point, right now, these manufacturers are trying to figure out how they can get portions of their vehicle outsourced within that network. So we are starting at that level to really push it on up. Okay.
So last question.
Last question. We'll take the last question, and there's still more questions in the room. We'll keep going. Yes.
So I'll go ahead and give this minute.
Okay.
One of your first slides talking about the utilization of the real estate.
Yes.
The airport has a lot of real estate that's filled with cars for lease on it.
Yeah.
What is JT doing to try to get some of those vehicles out there by providing more transportation access to the airport?
Yep. So we're just kind of starting our dialogue with the airport authority. I will tell you, there's been a more lucrative space with the Jax port. As you can imagine, what we call managing the yard, in terms of trucking, in terms of the trailers, and then if you ever drive by the Bates Point Bridge and you look and you see all the containers, you know, the one, I guess, thing that's critical for them is manpower, right? Your ability, even when you look at overall logistics, supply chain, transportation, their bottleneck is their ability to kind of get drivers on the road, driving at night, you know, limited time where you can have certain 18-wheelers on the road and whatever the case may be to move product from point A to point B. When you look at a typical port, the moving of those trailers is something right now that has an enormous opportunity to be automated, right? You know, the autonomous kits, you can build an autonomous, you know, trailer mover and so on and so forth. Your question about the airport is a little unique. A lot of sometimes, you know, long-term parking lots, you have folks that are coming from, you know, ways and want to leave their vehicle there. But you bring up an interesting point because part of it is going to be, you know, maybe the future of how we provide that connectivity, whether it is through commuter rail or some connectivity where you can land at the airport and very quickly. We do have JTA services already at the airport. We do provide bus service to the airport connection to all that. But your point is on a massive scale, you know, and that will be something that possibly, you know, could warrant something like a commuter rail type of system similar to what you see in New York, what they've done with AirTrain, Metro North, and so on and so forth. Yes, sir.
Going back to the air taxi, I can't imagine that the cost of that is very cheap. What is the
of the actual vehicle?
Of the actual vehicle.
Yeah.
What is the capacity of passengers? It's gonna be a while before that thing's worth that.
The question is, the air taxi, what's the capacity of the vehicle? It is 4 passengers. I had it on the slide. It's a piloted. It's 4 passengers, including the pilot, I believe. So 3 passengers in the pilot, or they might be working on a little bit wider version, but it's not going to be more than 4 or 5, because again, it's all electric, right? And so the particular technology has these rotating wings that use the jets in terms of propulsion, and so they're going to be confined to a certain weight requirement in terms of what they can transport. Yes, sir.
Maybe I can throw a little humor in at the end.
Okay, please.
You said about a 2-3-year plan of the rail system for downtown proper, and then what's the vision for spoking out? How much more gray hair will you have by the time?
well, as you can tell, I've lost some of it since starting to work at the JTA. So you bring up your question, tells me I need to clarify more. The 2 to 3 years will be for the first phase, which is the Bay Street Innovation Corridor. Okay, that project is in a procurement right now and is going to get bid on and awarded this year. And then we see 2 years from now, 3 years from now, you will start to see autonomous vehicles show up on Bay Street within that blue route that I had. In parallel, we are working right now on funding and the design and the development of the retrofit portion, as well as the expansion. The expansion will be the last thing to come because you're talking about expanding into different neighborhoods, so that crosses multiple districts, that's going to have to involve city council. There's a lot of nuances with that. So that will be a longer play. If we had our wish, through a P3, through a right public-private partnership, and a $500 million infusion, we'd be all ready to go on all 4 phases now. But right now, we're doing 1 phase at a time. Our goal is hopefully by next year or very soon have the right P3 and the right funding in place to start in parallel bidding and putting out the other bids for the other phases so that they can happen simultaneously. Put it this way, from the time that we award the bid, right, the retrofit of the Skyway takes 2 years, right? Part of the initial design work that we've done and evaluation that we've done tells us that it can be fully retrofitted in 2 years. So if I don't get funding for 5, then 7 years out. If I get funding next year, you kind of catch up, right? So I want to kind of explain that because it's really, that's the limiting factor.
Just one more, 'cause I just thought something really.
Matt is rushing. We keep it going, Matt. This is what's exciting about it. Go ahead.
I am an IT guy, but I just thought about something.
Yes.
You know, when you have a driver on a vehicle,
Yes.
they potentially could help mitigate crime. So, like, what's the thoughts about something, panic moment?
Got it.
There's an active shoot, there's something
Yep.
happening, there's no one there on the bus to
Yep.
mitigate it. I mean, there's actually a collateral benefit to all these cameras and AI to reduce crime.
Correct.
But on the vehicle, you're in a tin box.
Yeah.
So what are the thoughts there?
So that's a very good question. The question was, the thought of the actual safety driver on the vehicle, helps reduce crime. So I'll give you, I'll play both sides of the coin. There are times, like for example, right now we have bus operators that drive our buses. The bus drivers don't, they worry about their safety first and the safety of their passengers. They're not necessarily crime fighters. So it's sometimes maybe a mentality thing. You know, now if you're going to put trained cops and detectives as a safety driver, they're going to be crime fighters for you. But the average guy who signs up to drive a vehicle is not trying to crime fight. Okay.
It's also a liability issue.
It's also a liability issue. Thank you, Matt. But to your point, do they play a role in terms of, you know, eyes, ears, and being able to interpret a situation? Maybe so. The other side of it is the artificial intelligence, the power of the software, the power of facial recognition, the power of some of the things that are happening far exceed what the actual human can do on board.
No, I shouldn't have mentioned a physical driver.
Okay.
Being there, I just think what might be in the process to mitigate with no driver.
Oh, so I alluded to this. So the remote command and control requirement that we have is completely eyes and ears both inside the vehicle and outside the vehicle. So in our system, and if you ever get a chance when we open it up to the public post-COVID, you come up to our test facility at Armsdale, you can experience what the virtual command center would look like. The virtual command center has eyes all throughout Bay Street, so we see that, and has eyes and ears inside the vehicle. And at any point in time, it's being monitored, and the JTA can take command of the vehicle. No different now. By the way, we operate an automated people mover. The Skyway is unattended. The Skyway operates right now. There's no attendant on board, but there's a control center where they monitor everything that goes on there, and we alert, we tell JSO, meet that train at Central Avenue, or meet that train at Jefferson, and the police will be waiting there for you when you finish doing your naughtiness on board.
7 years.
But you bring up an interesting question. The future of this is everything in all our lives will be interconnected. Everything will be interconnected. Down to when you talk crime fighting, it's an interesting play because the vehicle does have the ability to not just scan within the corridor, but even within a certain range. So for example, let's say the vehicle is driving down Bay Street. The vehicle, for example, all of our phones that activate, that just to get a signal and have Bluetooth and Bluetooth technology, they ping and triangulate your location. And so it is conceivable at some point that you could get a situation and the police show up and say, hey, last night at 10 p.m., a block away, there was a murder. And the nearest thing was the JTA AV shuttle was going down the street at exactly 9:59. Can you go back into records and look at every cell phone that pinged within range of that vehicle that it picked up as a passenger or was registered with it? And you could get into that kind of situation. The cameras could do facial recognition and report back. You could connect with ShotSpotter and JSO. There's a slew of opportunities of where this technology could go, that if there are lawyers in the room, you start to get into ACLU, you start to get into all that, right? You start to get into my rights and ACLU and privacy and all that. But today, it's actually active. In fact, not to get political, but with the stuff that occurred recently at the Capitol, that has been the primary technology that the FBI has used to go find the folks. Because every cell phone unless your cell phone was off and the SIM card removed, it pinged everybody that was in proximity to the Capitol building, and the FBI went and got a data dump from T-Mobile, Sprint, Verizon, and AT&T, and they're just filtering through everybody. Okay.
Very good. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
He's closing me off, but we'll talk after. All right, to the folks online, thank you as well. Thank you for joining.
I was just wondering if there was the magical miss button. Everyone goes to sleep on the.
Yes. It's not there now, it's a good idea.
We gotta take it later.
Yes.
All right, so as we wrap this up, again, let's get another round of applause for great presentation, was it not? All right, so I see Jill and Meg in the back. Do you guys have anything from the chamber that you want to share with us?
The call is still open.
It's still open, come on up.
And real quick, Matt, let me just say something.
Many of you have asked, I apologize today, I did not bring my businesse cards. A few of you have asked. But if you give me your business cards, I will pin you, and if you need my email, it is bschmidt@jtafla.com. And I'm on LinkedIn, I'm all that, so you just look.
I'll be brief. Coming up 1 week from today, February 2nd, will be the Chamber's annual Small Business Leader of the Year breakfast. This is the opportunity where all of the Chamber councils and our Beaches Division and our Entrepreneurial Growth Division have selected and appointed their Small Business Leader of the Year. And we will convene for this breakfast to announce the overall Small Business Leader of the Year. So it's a great opportunity for you to register and support the IT Council's Small Business Leader of the Year 2021, Dr. Wendy Northridge.
Yes. Quickly.
Hey, Brian Allen, Career Source. Just want to let you know our funding cycle goes July to June. So we're kind of entering that crunch time that we would love to distribute money. Essentially, it's focused on employees that make less than $25 an hour. So if you're an organization or you call on organizations that have entry-level IT employment and they take third-party coursework and things like that, I would love to explain more how we can pay a minimum of half and sometimes 100%, somewhere in between there. Brian Allen, Career Source.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate that great service that you guys do over there at Career Source. So we have a couple protocols that we have for the tour, do we not?
You just go outside. The team will inform you of all the protocols that we need.
Excellent.
We have 3 shuttles, so this should be enough. It's limited to, I think 3 or 4 passengers on there. But they'll do a static demonstration, just walk you through it. A lot of stuff will be outdoors, so you should be fine.
Great, great. And the folks that are on the call, I know we went a little bit long because this was a great presentation, but if you want to hang on, we'll give you some virtual touring as well from a couple of us through our phones via Zoom. So with that, we have any other by the ways? All right, so meeting adjourned. Great meeting.
Excellent.